One more shout, and I'll end you. The words left Bianca Pearson's mouth before her brain could stop them. The entire restaurant went silent. Every champagne flute froze mid-clink. Every elegant conversation died. And the man sitting at table 12, the man whose dark, penetrating eyes had been watching every server in the place for the past 2 hours, just stared at her. His name was Gilberto Lombardo.
She didn't know that then.
All she knew was that he was arrogant, commanding, and had turned her already unbearable shift into absolute hell. But she was getting ahead of herself. Bianca was 26 when this happened. 26 and already feeling ancient. She believed in hard work. She believed that keeping your head down, doing your job, and pushing through exhaustion would eventually pay off. She believed dignity came from earning your way, no matter how difficult. Looking back, she was naive. Not foolish, naive. There's a difference. She'd been working at Rosewood, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, for 3 years. The money was decent on good nights, and management mostly left servers alone if they performed. Bianca worked every shift they offered, doubles, weekends, holidays. She needed every dollar she could get. Her father's medical bills were crushing her, and the debt seemed to multiply overnight no matter how hard she worked. That night, she'd been on her feet for 15 hours straight.
Her body ached.
Her mind was foggy with exhaustion. And then he walked in, Gilberto Lombardo, though she wouldn't learn his name until later, surrounded by an entourage that moved with military precision. For 2 hours, he treated her like she was invisible, snapping orders without eye contact, sending back a perfectly cooked steak with barely a glance, demanding things with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never been told no. When he shouted at her for the 3rd time, his voice cutting across the dining room like a whip, something inside Bianca finally snapped. The silence that followed Bianca's threat wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating. She stood there, order pad clutched in her trembling hand, staring down at Gilberto. He was looking right back at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Around them, the restaurant had transformed into a frozen tableau. Her coworker, Sarah, stopped mid-step, tray suspended in air. Marcus, the head waiter, stood near the kitchen with his mouth slightly open. Gilberto's companions were equally motionless. The elegant woman to his right, dripping in diamonds, had her wine glass halfway to her perfectly painted lips. 2 younger men flanking the table looked ready to spring into action, their bodies tense, hands moving toward their jackets. But Gilberto himself was completely still. For 3, maybe 4 seconds, his face remained blank. Then, slowly, so slowly it made Bianca's skin prickle, the corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. Something darker. More intrigued. "What did you just say to me?" His voice was quiet, dangerously calm. Bianca's heart hammered, but something reckless surged through her chest. "You heard me. I've been on my feet for 15 hours straight. I've served you perfectly all evening, and you've treated me like I'm nothing." She could see her manager, Paul, speed walking toward them, panic written across his face. She knew what was coming. Termination. Immediate. Probably escorted out by security. But here's the thing. She didn't care anymore. 3 years of barely scraping by. 3 years of swallowing insults and biting her tongue. 3 years of going home with aching feet and an empty bank account. Something had broken in her tonight. Or maybe something had finally been set free. Gilberto leaned back in his chair, still studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. He picked up his wine glass, took a slow sip, and then, impossibly, he smiled. Not a smirk. A real smile that transformed his severe features into something almost warm. "Interesting," he murmured, more to himself than to her. When Paul arrived at the table, stammering apologies, Gilberto waved him off with a casual gesture. "Leave us," he said, his eyes never leaving Bianca's face. That night, he left her a tip that was 3 times her usual take for an entire shift. and a business card with a single phone number embossed in gold. Bianca didn't sleep that night. She kept replaying the moment, her words, his smile, the way he dismissed her manager like he owned the place. Maybe he did. The next morning, Paul called her into his office before her shift. His face was gray, circles under his eyes matching hers. He closed the door, something he never did. "Bianca, do you have any idea who you threatened last night?" Her stomach dropped. "A rude customer with more money than manners?" Paul laughed without humor. "That was Gilberto Lombardo." When she stared blankly, he continued, "He's one of the most powerful men in this city. Controls half the shipping operations at the port. Owns dozens of businesses. And those are just the legitimate ones." Bianca's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, legitimate?" Paul looked at her like she'd just walked into traffic. "I mean he's connected, Bianca. The kind of connected where people don't ask questions. Last night, you threatened a Mafia boss in front of his entire crew." The office suddenly felt too small. "I didn't know." Obviously. Paul sat down heavily. "He called this morning. Personally. Asked for your full name and schedule." Bianca gripped the armrests of her chair. "What does that mean?" "It means men like Gilberto Lombardo don't forget." Paul's expression held pity and fear. Ever. But what Paul didn't tell her, what he couldn't have known, was that Gilberto hadn't called to threaten her. He'd called because, for the first time in years, someone had genuinely surprised him. And Gilberto Lombardo was a man who appreciated rare things. 3 days later, Gilberto returned to Rosewood. Bianca saw him the moment he walked through the door. Same confident stride, same expensive suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Her heart hammered, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was something else. Something she didn't want to name. He didn't sit in the dining room. He asked the host to send her to the private room in the back. When she pushed open the door, he was sitting alone at the table, 2 glasses of wine already poured. The sight of him in the intimate space made her breath catch. He was devastatingly handsome in the soft lighting, sharp cheekbones, dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, and those eyes that seemed to see straight through her.
"Sit," he said.
Not a command this time. An invitation. She sat. He studied her for a long moment, and Bianca felt heat rise to her cheeks under his intense gaze. "You have fire," he finally said, his voice like aged whiskey. "Most people who work in places like this, they've had it beaten out of them. But not you. Is that why you're here? To comment on my personality?" His lips curved. "I like that. No pretense. No false deference." He slid a folder across the table. "I have a proposition for you, Bianca. I need someone to manage my businesses. Someone organized, efficient, someone who isn't afraid to speak up when things aren't running properly." She stared at the folder. "What kind of businesses?" "Restaurants. Import companies. Logistics operations." He paused. "Legitimate businesses that need legitimate management." "And the pay?" He named a figure that made her throat go dry. More than she made in 6 months at Rosewood. That kind of money would change everything. "Why me?" she asked, forcing herself to meet his eyes. Something shifted in his expression, something almost vulnerable. "Because you're not afraid of me. And because—" He leaned forward, and she caught the scent of his cologne, expensive and intoxicating. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that night." The confession hung in the air between them, electric and dangerous. "This is just about business?" Bianca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gilberto's smile was slow, predatory, and devastatingly attractive. "For now." Against every ounce of common sense, Bianca heard herself say, "I'll do it." The offices were downtown, 20th floor, with a view that stretched across the entire city. Bianca's job was straightforward: keep everything running smoothly. What became complicated was working in close proximity to Gilberto Lombardo.
He was magnetic.
Commanding. When he walked into a room, the air itself seemed to change. And the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle he was determined to solve, made her skin flush with heat she had no business feeling. Within 2 weeks, Bianca had reorganized his shipping schedules and streamlined operations. Gilberto noticed. He started asking for her input, trusting her judgment, and spending more time in her office than his own. "You're brilliant," he told her one evening, leaning against her desk as she worked late. "Do you know that?" Bianca tried to ignore how her heart raced when he was close. "I'm just doing my job."
No.
He moved closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You're exceptional." But as the weeks passed, Bianca began noticing irregularities. Invoices that didn't match deliveries. Cash payments with no clear source. Money moving in patterns that made no sense for legitimate business. One night, working late, she found shipping manifests that didn't align with any restaurant equipment. Container weights that were wrong. Transactions labeled as consulting fees, with no names attached. Her stomach turned as realization dawned. This wasn't legitimate business. This was money laundering. "You're working late." She jumped. Gilberto stood in her doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked impossibly attractive and impossibly dangerous. "Just finishing reconciliations," she managed. He walked over, glanced at her screen. His expression didn't change. "You're very thorough." "Gilberto, these transactions keep my businesses running smoothly." He pulled up a chair, sat close enough that their knees almost touched. "You've done excellent work making sure everything appears exactly as it should." "Appears." The word made her chest tighten. "I'm not sure I can continue." "You already have." His voice wasn't threatening, just factual. "For 6 weeks now. You've been invaluable, Bianca." She should have been angry, terrified. Instead, she felt something more complicated, a dangerous pull toward this man who was so wrong for her in every way. "Why did you really hire me?" she whispered. Gilberto's hand moved to her face, his thumb brushing her cheek in a touch so gentle it made her breath catch. "Because from the moment you threatened me, I was fascinated. And fascination has turned into something much more dangerous." "This is insane," she breathed, even as she leaned into his touch. "Yes," he agreed, his eyes dark with desire. "It is." The call came on a Tuesday morning. Bianca's father's hospital, informing her that all his bills, $50,000, had been paid by an anonymous donor. She knew immediately who was responsible. She found Gilberto in his office, calmly reviewing documents. "My father's hospital bills," she said, her voice shaking. "That was you." "Yes." "Why?" He stood, walked toward her with that predatory grace. "Because you needed help. Because I could provide it." "I didn't ask." "No, but you needed it." He stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel his breath. "Your father is alive and recovering because of me, Bianca." The room tilted. "How long have you known about him?" "Since before I offered you this job." He said it without apology. "I know everything about you. Your father's illness. Your debt. The fact that you were 3 weeks from eviction when you threatened me." Bianca's heart hammered. "You've been controlling my life. I've been taking care of you." His hand cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone. "There's a difference." "Is there?" She should pull away. She didn't. "You've made me dependent on you. Tied me to you with money and favors I never asked for." "With loyalty," he interrupted. "I've given you everything you needed. And in return." His other hand moved to her waist, pulling her closer. "In return, you've given me something I didn't know I was missing." "What's that?" she whispered, dizzy from his proximity. "A reason to want to be a better man." Then his mouth was on hers, and Bianca forgot every reason this was wrong. The kiss was devastating, hungry and demanding, yet somehow tender. His hands tangled in her hair, and she gripped his shoulders, feeling the hard muscle beneath expensive fabric. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gilberto rested his forehead against hers. I'm not a good man, Bianca. I've done terrible things. But when I'm with you, I want to be. I should run from you, she said, even as her fingers traced the strong line of his jaw. Yes, he agreed. You should. But neither of them moved apart. The file was labeled pharmaceutical logistics, and it shattered everything. Bianca found it late one night, unable to sleep after another heated encounter with Gilberto had left her confused and wanting. The payment authorization for $50,000, her father's medical bills, traced back to an account funded by offshore transfers. Those transfers came from cash deposits from clubs and bars, all fronts for drug distribution. Her father's life had been saved with blood money. She ran to the bathroom and vomited. When she returned, Gilberto was there, the folder open in front of him. He didn't look surprised to see her distress.
He looked sad.
You weren't supposed to find that, he said quietly. How could you? Her voice broke. You told me these were legitimate businesses. You said. I said what you needed to hear. He stood, but didn't approach. Your father is alive, Bianca. You're not drowning anymore. Does it really matter where the money came from? Yes. She screamed it. People are dying because of what you do. And you used that blood money to trap me, to make you mine. His voice was raw with emotion she'd never heard before. From the moment you threatened me, I knew I had to have you. Not just as an employee, as mine. I'm not yours, she said, but her voice wavered. Aren't you? He finally moved closer, and she saw anguish in his dark eyes. You feel this too, Bianca. This pull between us. Tell me you don't think about me every night. Tell me you don't want me the way I want you. She couldn't, because it was true. Despite everything, the danger, the criminality, the manipulation, she'd fallen for Gilberto Lombardo. And that terrified her more than anything else. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't be part of your world. Pain flashed across his face, quickly masked. Then go. I won't stop you. But they both knew it wasn't that simple. Not anymore. The charity gala was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, a glittering affair where the city's elite gathered. Gilberto was the guest of honor. Bianca received an invitation, hand-delivered. A black dress that fit perfectly and a note in his handwriting. Please come.
She
should have ignored it. Instead, she put on the dress and went. He was holding court near the bar, surrounded by people vying for his attention. But when Bianca walked in, his eyes found her immediately. The intensity of his gaze across the crowded room made her breath catch. He excused himself from his admirers and walked straight to her, ignoring everyone else. You came, he said, and she heard hope in his voice. I shouldn't have. But you did. His hand moved to her waist, possessive and gentle. Dance with me. Gilberto. One dance. Then you can tell me to go to hell if you want. She let him lead her to the dance floor. The moment his arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, Bianca felt like she was home. It was wrong and dangerous and completely insane. I have something to tell you, she said as they swayed to the music. I know what you're going to say. His hand tightened on her waist. You're going to walk away. And I understand why. But first, let me say something. She looked up at him, seeing vulnerability in his usually guarded expression. I've spent my entire life building an empire, taking what I wanted without apology. But you, his voice dropped to a whisper, you make me want to tear it all down. For you, I would walk away from everything. Bianca's heart pounded. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more. He cupped her face with one hand, thumb brushing her lips. Tell me what you want, Bianca. Tell me, and I'll make it happen. Around them, people were watching, whispering. But Bianca only saw him, this dangerous, complicated, impossible man who somehow made her feel more alive than she'd ever felt. "I want you," she admitted, the words tumbling out. "But I want the real you. Not the criminal. Not the lies. I want the man who saved my father. Who looks at me like I matter. Who makes me feel." He kissed her, right there in front of everyone. A kiss that was promise and apology and hunger all at once. When they broke apart, Bianca saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Determination. "Then you'll have him," Gilberto said. "Whatever it takes." The next morning, Gilberto did the impossible. He called the FBI. Over the next week, he provided evidence against his own organization, names, accounts, operations. Everything except Bianca's involvement, which he protected fiercely. His associates were arrested. His empire dismantled. And Gilberto negotiated a deal, testimony in exchange for reduced charges and immunity for Bianca. "Why?" she asked him in his apartment the night before he was scheduled to surrender. "Why give up everything?" He pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms. "Because you were right. I'm not a good man. But maybe I can become one. And I'd rather spend 5 years in prison knowing you're free than spend the rest of my life in a golden cage without you." Bianca buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent. "I'll wait for you."
No.
He tilted her face up, his eyes serious. "Build your life. Start your restaurant. Be happy. And if, when I get out, you still want me, I'll want you," she interrupted. 5 years or 50. I'll want you. Their last night together was bittersweet, making love slowly, memorizing each other, promising things neither was sure they could keep. 5 years later, Bianca stood in the kitchen of Pearson's, her restaurant, plating the final dish for table 6. The space was small but perfect, 15 tables, exposed brick, and food that had earned rave reviews. She'd built it from nothing, with money she'd earned legitimately and pride that didn't require anyone suffering. The bell over the door chimed. She looked up from the pass. And there he was, Gilberto Lombardo, 5 years older, wearing jeans instead of a suit, with shadows in his eyes that hadn't been there before. But when he saw her, his face transformed with a smile that was purely, devastatingly real. "Hi," he said simply. Bianca's heart hammered. She'd thought about this moment for 5 years. Practiced what she'd say. How she'd react. Instead, she just walked into his arms. "Welcome home," she whispered against his chest. His arms tightened around her, and she felt him shudder. "I thought you might have moved on." She pulled back, looking up at him. "I told you I'd wait. I keep my promises." "So do I." He cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheek in that familiar gesture she'd dreamed about. "I promised I'd become a better man. I've spent 5 years trying. I'm not the man I was, Bianca. I can't give you wealth or power or... I don't want that." She stood on her toes, bringing her lips close to his. "I just want you. The real you." When he kissed her, gentle and reverent and full of 5 years of longing, Bianca knew they'd finally found their beginning. Not in his world of shadows and crime. Not in her world of struggle and survival. But in something new they'd build together. Something real. Something honest. Something worth waiting for. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and be part of a community that cherishes unforgettable tales like this one. Your support means more than you know. It fuels the creation of even more stories that speak to the heart. So, whether you're watching from your TV or your phone, take a moment to join us. Every like, every subscription, every share helps us continue bringing these stories to life. Thank you for being a part of this journey.